All right. Let all of the audience members into the room here. Welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris. I'm the events coordinator. And tonight we're thrilled to be hosting the launch for Looking for Miss America by Margot Mifflin. Thank you everybody for coming. You'll be able to ask questions through the Q&A function on your screen there on the bottom. And Margot and Jessica will take your questions at the end. You can also buy the book at powerhousebookstores.com. The link is in the event page, and I'll repost it right now in the chat. You want to make sure to buy a book. In any case, Margot will be in conversation with Jessica Bennett, and let me introduce Jessica and Margot now. Jessica Bennett is an award-winning journalist at the New York Times and the author of Feminist Fight Club, a survival manual for a sexist workplace. She has a fascination with all things Miss America and reported from the 2018 pageant. The author of the powerhouse book, Bodies of Subversion and The Blue Tattoo, Margot Mifflin has written for the New York Times, Vogue, Vice, Elle, O, the Oprah Magazine, The New Yorker, and many other publications. Mifflin is a professor at Lehman College of the City University of New York and the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. And I'll hand it over now.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Margot.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your joining me here. And I also wanted to say thanks to Powerhouse because Powerhouse published my first book, Bodies of Subversion, and has been a supporter for 20 years. So shout out to Daniel Power.
And they have the best venue that we're sad we can't be in.
Yeah,
today.
I really am. And to all the people who are here, I'm really sad that we can't be carousing in person and having a drink after this, but we'll do the best we can.
So I want to just get this out of the way because I feel like you probably get this question all the time. Is Miss America, is this the Donald Trump pageant?
This is the other pageant.
Okay.
And that's, I think, a real thorn in Miss America's side, but that's probably the biggest misconception about Miss America out there. And when I was researching it, I can't tell you how many people, probably 90%, said, oh, the timing is so good because of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump had owned Miss USA and Miss Universe for about a decade, I guess, from maybe like 95 to 2005. And, a few years ago had hit the media, well, when he was running had made news for having fat shamed contestants and busted in on Miss Teen USA contestants at one of those pageants. So Miss America has always been relatively scandal-free until recently with an ugly incident with the recent CEO. But historically, it has been a very different pageant, not only because it was not owned by Donald Trump, but because it's a scholarship pageant, which Miss USA is not.
Right, the famous Miss Congeniality line, right? It's a scholarship fund.
Scholarship pageant, damn it.
So tell us a little bit about why Miss America? What drew you to this subject? And I love, there's so many places in the book where I feel like you are debunking some of these persistent myths and also telling us this fascinating history about this institution that most of us know of, but probably don't know a lot about.
Yeah, and I learned a lot about it researching it that made me realize I had a lot of misconceptions about it myself. The way I got started was I just was browsing around on the TV one day and stumbled on Miss America maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I kind of couldn't believe what I was seeing with the swimsuit portion, that was still happening. And you could kind of see the psychic pain of some of the women who had to go through that. And I just thought, this has been, did a little research, thought this has been going on for almost 100 years. I couldn't believe, because it's a huge piece of women's history and one of the the longest running annual television shows in American history. I was surprised that nobody had written a cultural history or a feminist analysis of it, just to make sense of not only what it means now, but what it had meant historically, which I discovered was never one thing. It's always evolved and had things added onto it and meant different things to different people, very different meaning for the general culture than to fans and insiders of Miss America culture. So I just started researching it and then dug up all this great historical stuff about the fabulous characters who emerged, because, you know, whenever you have a ritual that constricts women's behavior or tells women to conform, you're going to have people who push against that. And those have been some of the most interesting Miss Americas who either broke the rules or pushed the rules to push it along and make it progress with the times.
Can you take us inside that world a bit? What is the world of Miss America like? What is they have their own kind of language around it. And there was this guidebook of what you might consider now to be insane rules for who was allowed to participate. Take us into the world of Miss America.
So you have to be between 17 and 25, last I checked. I do feel that the rules change pretty frequently, but I believe it's 17 to 25. The contestants have to be single without children. So that takes it straight back to the 1920s when it was a bathing beauty contest in the service of sort of picking America's ideal woman who was really America's ideal marriageable woman. So that stands today, that rule that you must be childless. And I was interested to see at the 2019, I guess, December 2019 pageant, that the two of the finalists, including the current winner, Camille Schreier, were asked, what do you think about, one of the judges asked, what do you think about the fact that Miss America has to be single and childless? And the argument has always been, well, you have to travel for a year, you have to do your service for a year, and therefore you can't, be leaving a child behind while you're doing this full-time job, which doesn't take into account that lots of women have travel jobs that demand their time and don't have to be childless to do that. But anyways, so the women were asked this question, and this is kind of classic, I find, Miss America, where they are expected, like, in any institution, to toe the line of the rules of the institution. And so said, well, basically stated the reasons I just said. And then the judge turned around and said, well, I don't think that should be. I don't think that's, reflective of the times that we're living in. And so that's kind of a classic case of the way women get trapped in this kind of a ritual, asked to conform in one way and then thrown these curveballs that take them by surprise. They were trying to do their best as contestants and got a curveball.
Which judge was that?
Oh, I forgot who he was.
So it was a man judge who said this is behind the times.
He's from Queer Eye. I forgot his name now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So he sort of spoke up against the ritual.
Right, yeah.
Which is absurd.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would be, if you're going to be judged in a competition, you would hope that the judges judging support the rules of the competition,
Right. Okay, so how did Miss America get started? One fascinating little tidbit that I had never thought of previously is that they wear the sashes, like the famous sashes. But actually the women who popularized those sashes were the suffragists who were fighting for the right to vote. And so tomorrow, August 18th, is the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which granted American women the right to vote. We, of course, know that many Black and brown women, many African-American women, those were just who were disenfranchised in the South, didn't actually they weren't able to actually exercise that right until much longer, which is sort of parallel to some of the things we're going to talk about with Miss America. But we are now coming up on the centennial of the Miss America pageant. Who knew? These two things that seem totally unrelated, but actually the sashes are sort of related and the timelines are related. So how did Miss America begin?
I think it's not a coincidence that Miss America was started the year after women got the vote. I mean, part of its origin story has to do with fashion, with the fact that women were liberated to wear form-fitting swimsuits shortly before that time and discard these heavy woolen, basically gowns they had to wear in the water to that point. So the swimsuit was a sign of progress because it acknowledged that women were active and athletic. So that was one piece of it. But in terms of the timing and the sash, the women who were protesting and activists in the name of getting the vote were wearing the sash in a sort of collective way. They were wearing the colors of the suffragists, and their activism was about group progress. Whereas Miss America inverted that. The sashes were showing individual identities or regional identities. And so, I say in the book that Miss America was about woman with a capital W, singular, and whereas the suffragists were about women collectively and progressive change. And the early winners it was both a pushback, consciously or not, against women's progress, or at the very least, an expression of anxiety about it. Because the first winners were very girlish, they were very young. The first winner was 16 when she won, Margaret Gorman. In fact, when she won her local contest in Washington, D.C., the reporters came to her door to interview her, and she hadn't heard yet that she had won. And they were told she was down the street, and they went down the street and found her playing marbles in the dirt. So she was basically a kid, as many of the early Miss Americas were. So they were girlish, young, initially like very slim, girlish in their appearance, very Mary Pickford-esque in their appearance. So that went on pretty much through the 20s. In subsequent decades, the body types and the personality types changed. And also there were a whole lot of different types of Miss America just by virtue of the fact that the pool of contestants expanded. There were only 8 contestants the first year.
Okay.
Just kept growing and growing.
And it's so fascinating to think that at that time, the form-fitting swimsuit was a sign of liberation. And then, of course, into 2018, 2019, the swimsuit was banned by Miss America because it was seen as, very retro. But so much about your book, you refer to it as a feminist history. It's been referred to as a feminist history in a lot of the coverage and the reviews. I did not previously think of Miss America as something feminist or something that had this push and pull with feminism of the time. Talk to us about that. What was its relationship with the women's movement?
Well, I think push-pull is definitely the term, because in some ways, it's always had these interesting paradoxes. In some ways, it became more progressive when this formative director, Lenora Slaughter, came on in the 30s, who didn't want it to just be a bathing beauty contest. She wanted it to be a bathing beauty contest. She saw that was, the core draw, but she also wanted to give the winners more than like fur coats and a Hollywood contract, and open it up to people who didn't necessarily want to be entertainers. So she added a bunch of rules. She added the talent so that they were actually doing something rather than just being pretty. And she added in 1945, the scholarships. so that was huge, and it's sort of defining benefit and the thing that sets it apart from other beauty contests. And it has benefited a lot of women. So, and there's a whole class element to this that I think that one of the really underexplored aspects of Miss America is the class angle, because it has afforded so many lower income women a sense of social mobility, and education that they might not otherwise have gotten. So the class analysis is sort of shows you how that, or at least I hope showed in the book, how that works. But then that's also, the whole ritual is an expression of class anxiety, in the sense that it was structured like a debutante ball, and yet it's not mirroring a debutante ball, because debutante balls were for the upper classes and intended to protect the upper classes and, fortify them and preserve them. Whereas Miss America was adopting all of those rituals of the walking, the presenting the women, the carrying the flowers, the emphasis on charm and etiquette and marriageability, which debutante balls were all about. But it was performing a more democratic service in the sense that it actually did hike lower income women up into the middle class or the upper classes by, through the money they want or the educations they got. So I may have lost your question.
No, well, that's so okay. So it wasn't until this slaughter woman in the 1940s that it actually became a scholarship fund. Mm-hmm. That helped people in way and introduced the talent competition, which was then not just about beauty. But in fact, wasn't there a clause until some insane year that barred anyone who was not white from competing?
Yes, the notorious Rule Number 7 said, okay. And that was under Lenora Slaughter, it said that women who competed had to be in good health and of the white race. So that was sort of unstated from its early years, but then it was formalized in the 40s and then retired in the 50s. And it was really directed specifically at Black women, because some Latinas and Asians competed. They didn't win before then. But Slaughter said, actually it was, I forget what the tribe was, but a Native American tribe protested this, saying, why shouldn't we be able to send contestants from our contest that we have in our state? And she said, well, you're welcome to. The Rule Number 7 is really just about Black women, because we don't really know how to judge their beauty. Wow. So, very strange comment that confirms the sort of racialization of beauty and in her perception of beauty. She was herself very paradoxical. She was very stubborn on the subject of race and utterly contemptible. I'm not sure she ever really got over it. But then going back to the feminist question, she was both pushing women to use this opportunity and get something really concrete out of it that would change their lives. And yet she was telling them, you must find a good husband. And as late as 1970, shortly after she retired, she was saying, the biggest achievement in your life will be your marriage. So she was not really moving with the times in 1970, when women were, many women were recognizing that marriage wasn't the be all and end all of their existence.
It just sounds like in so many ways, and this is partly what the book does, you can trace history, you can trace American history and cultural perceptions of women and of things like race and class through the lens of Miss America.
Yes, exactly. And going back to your feminist question, the one of the great sort of transitional moments for Miss America was the 1960 Boardwalk Protest, when feminists turned out, chanted on the boardwalk, sang, demonstrated. They had they brought a sheep that they used as a symbol of the, as a metaphor for the women competing in the contest who, they charged were conformist and, not aware of the way they were being used by men, basically, for this contest. I interviewed a couple women who were, Judy Ford, who was the winner that year, and then Deborah Barnes, who was the outgoing queen that year, who had some really interesting things to say about their experience of this. Judy said, I knew exactly what I was doing, and it was an opportunity, and I needed this opportunity. She was by no means a sheep in the sense that she was an athlete who was told when she was being trained to compete, and she had just won a local beauty contest like 6 weeks before she went to Miss America, but whoever was training her said, "You walk like an athlete," and she said, "Oh, thanks," and they said, "It's not a compliment." So I guess she was being sort of limited in that sense, but she was an athlete, and she was the only woman on the men's gymnastics team at her school, and was the first woman at her school to get a varsity letter. So she wanted to continue, and she saw that opportunity and took it, which I think a lot of women do, in terms of using their beauty to get an opportunity, especially in the early part of the 20th century or the first half, where women's opportunities just weren't that bountiful. So they did what they could to get somewhere.
Okay, and I'm a little bit obsessed with that 1968 protest at the pageant in Atlantic City, which we were talking about before this started. But fun little feminist history. This is actually where the term bra burning originated. Is that right?
Yes. And
so, feminists were they're bra burners. But I'll let you debunk the myth.
Yeah, so both bra burning and the term women's liberation. The bra burning never happened. What happened was the women were throwing these symbols of women's oppression in a trash can and had planned to burn them, like women's magazines, garters, mops, makeup, and but they couldn't get a permit to burn this stuff, so they never burned it. But somehow it got out that they had burned it, or it got out that they planned to burn it. So a couple of journalists just reported that they did burn it, and that just took root. And to this day, people are referring derogatorily to feminists as bra burners. And then the other great thing was that there was a protest outside on the boardwalk, which I loved writing this section because it just seemed like so much fun. The women who organized it, and the coming together, and the sort of intersectionality involved, and a whole different story. The first Miss Black America happened the same night, basically. But anyway, so there was a protest inside where women rolled out a bed sheet that said women's liberation during the pageant. And that was so frequently reported, or so vastly reported, that it was really the first introduction of the term women's liberation into the general public. I mean, it had been out there, but it just sort of amplified it on a national scale.
Okay, and you mentioned Miss Black America. So was that a separate pageant? And who was the first Black Miss America? Can you talk a bit more about when Black women actually became part of the pageant?
Okay, so this was 68, and it was started by a man, I'm forgetting his name, but his daughters had said they wanted to be Miss America, a Black man who realized his daughters weren't probably going to be Miss America. And so he organized this pageant. I'm blanking on the name of the first winner, Cheryl Saunders, maybe, Sandra, anyway. And I was just reading about her this afternoon. Somebody just wrote an article about her. I forget what the occasion of revisiting this was, but so it was small scale. The women rode in convertibles through Atlantic City, and then they had a contest, and the winner said like, we're happy to have this because we don't really have any use for the white Miss America that exists. And then it got pretty popular. It continues today. Oprah Winfrey was a contestant in Miss Black America. And the second year, 1969, it moved to Madison Square Garden. It was no longer in Atlantic City. And Michael Jackson performed on that Black America stage. And other impressive people. Like it had a really good lineup and much bigger turnout. And it just found its own footing and has lasted since.
Still in existence?
Still in existence, yeah.
Okay. And am I right that it was Vanessa Williams who was in fact the first Black woman who was a Miss America?
Yes, there was an important precursor. So that rule number 7, it went until, it was retired in the 50s, but Black women didn't start to compete till the late 60s. And in the late 60s, it was, the contestants were less than 1% Black. There were like 40 or 50 people nationally competing. But then in 1970, Cheryl Brown won a state title and went to Miss America. So she was the first to compete at the highest level. She didn't win. And she was from Iowa, or she competed as Iowa, I guess, but she was from New York. This seems to happen a lot in Miss America. There's a sort of carpetbagger aspect to it that, in the distant past, people would lose in one state and then go to another and try there and win. But in her case, she just happened to be in college in, I think it was Iowa, and competed there. And I think Iowa had like a less than 2% Black population. So it's kind of impressive that she ended up Miss Iowa. But anyway, so she was 1970, she kind of opened the door, and then in the late 70s and into the 79, 80, there were, put it this way, there were more people who competed, and not until 1983 did Vanessa Williams win as the first Miss Black America. And there have been actually many since. I think there have been 8 since, 8 Black winners.
Yeah, it was the one that I attended in 2018, there were a ton of women of color who were finalists. And I think it was Nia Jackson, a Black woman, who was the winner.
Yes. Franklin, yeah.
Franklin.
Yeah.
So, okay. I want to talk a bit more about contemporary Miss America. So it's got this fascinating history. In many ways, you can sort of see it as a lens through which to view social mores, taboos, the way that we view women, the way we view race. And then it has struggled in, let's say, recent years. Maybe it feels a little bit outdated, maybe kind of a relic of a different time, but viewership has really struggled. They have tried to move it to some different locations. And then in recent years, they have tried all of these different things to modernize it. Can you walk us through a bit what's happened to Miss America in the last couple of decades?
Yeah, a lot has happened. And I just have to add, because it came back to me, it was Sandra Williams, who was the first Miss Black America. So in recent decades, there have been these changes. I mean, since the scholarships were added in 1945, another major step was in I guess it was 1990, there was a social issues platform added, and perhaps for the same logic that the scholarships had been added, that their Miss America organization wanted this to be an organization that contributed to society. So along with competing, the women had to pick a platform like literacy or domestic abuse or AIDS. A couple women early on actually chose AIDS awareness as their platform. And so then the next big change was the removal of the swimsuit in 2018. But then there were a cluster of other changes. That seems that year that you and I were both at the pageant 2018, which is called the 2019 pageant because the 2019 winner.
Okay.
I found it was like refreshingly progressive. As you said, there were a lot of women of color who were finalists. I have to say, though, there has never been a Latina Miss America. So that problematic racial history continues there. But there were a lot of finalists who were women of color, and they got rid of the gown, the evening gown. I think that was about, just young women aren't really wearing evening gowns the way they were in 1950.
Especially not now.
Right, yeah. COVID is going to put the kibosh on that for good now, I think. Or actually, maybe it'll be just the opposite. People will be so ecstatic to get out of their homes, they'll just start buying ball gowns. But so there was the removal of the swimsuit, the what was the other thing I just said? The changes in the sorry, what? The gowns, yeah, the gowns, thank you. And the then director or board chair, I guess, Gretchen Carlson, who was Miss America 1989, my perception was that even though she wasn't acting alone, she had a board she was working with, but she had initiated many of these changes, and she publicly said, we want to be more inclusive about diverse body types, which Miss America never has historically. So that was refreshing. I can't say I've seen a lot of that since then, but a little.
Yeah, I can tell you there was not a lot of diversity in body types when I was there, but this is fascinating. So Gretchen Carlson, so this is post Me Too. Gretchen Carlson, who has spoken out bravely against Fox News, been part of a lawsuit, like this very public figure, and also happened to have been a Miss America, which I didn't know about her, takes over the organization, which is like, that seems weird, but okay, fine. She institutes all these changes. They get rid of swimsuits. I guess I was not a Miss America expert by any means, and I always I thought it was a relic, and I thought it was this kind of kitschy thing, and a lot of my, where's my phone ringing in the middle of our Zoom? Sorry, good COVID times. A lot of I had a whole cohort of gay friends who loved it and would go, and they saw it as this kind of fun performance, and they would go watch the shows, and they'd go to Atlantic City and make a weekend of it. But I always kind of brushed off this idea of the women who competed, and I have to say, these women were incredible. They all had like 17 degrees. It's like Harvard and MIT. They're scientists. And instead of, I think, maybe the ball gown aspect of it, or the swimsuit aspect, the talents had changed. And so instead of like juggling or tap dancing or whatnot, they were like doing science experiments. And I was actually like, this is incredible. Like, this is still weird, but this is incredible.
Right.
And so that seemed really refreshing in a lot of ways. But what has happened since then? Like, was that sort of a last grasp at relevancy in the modern era?
Well, I think it did progress in the sense that the last winner, Camille Schrier, was a person who did a science demonstration in December. And that was a big change in itself, because historically the women, even if they want to be a neurobiologist, historically they've had to come up with a song and dance routine or do some kind of performative talent. There was one
ventriloquism.
That and baton twirling continued. Okay. That was what surprised me when I was initially rediscovering it 5 or 6 years ago. But Camille Schrier said, I guess there was some change that allowed her not to have to perform, because previously sometimes women would just, one I interviewed, they would have no performing talent, so they would just study a song, play it over and over and over and over and over again, and like that was their talent at Miss America. It wasn't like they were otherwise playing the piano or the violin or whatever. So what changed in December was that Camille Schreier won. Well, she entered saying, I'm not going to do a performing talent, and that was approved. And I don't know if that was like a formal rule change. I can't quite remember, or if she was just accommodated. But she won without having done any kind of singing or anything like that. And
Okay.
it was great. I mean, it was still Miss America. She was doing her science experiment with these chandelier earrings and a lab coat, but she did it, you know. So that's something. That's a step towards a more applied kind of Miss America talent.
And so I guess there's a couple of things. Okay, so briefly back to the scholarship competition or whatever. So this is a scholarship fund. Is it really a scholarship fund? Hasn't it been like debunked that there's actually scholarship money? Like, what is the deal with the scholarships? Is this legit? Is this actually going to a good cause? Should we be skeptical of this?
Yeah, I think there was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, or no, around the time I was first rediscovering it, John Oliver did an expose. The problem was that Miss America was saying that they were giving out something like $45 million in scholarships, when in fact they were giving about $4 million. And their lawyer, when I interviewed him, told me that it's now about $3 million. But what they were doing was they were saying they were adding up all the scholarships women could get from multiple colleges and presenting that as the number of scholarships given. Whereas a woman would have to have gone to 5 colleges with, you know, each a $20,000 scholarship for all those numbers to add up. So they stopped saying that. Now they say 3 to 4 million. But the other thing, this isn't a scandal because it's above board, but it very much surprised me. One thing that separates Miss America from Miss USA is Miss USA has an entry fee. Miss America does not. And what I discovered talking to the lawyer was that the contestants do have to, quote, that's the term used, raise money to compete. So they raise money through friends or family or whatever that is funneled into the organization for charity. It's not an entry fee, it goes to charity. But that money, he confirmed, pays for 85% of the scholarship money. So it's sort of like a lottery. You're putting this money in and you're paying a lot of money to compete. You got to buy the gowns and get the training and everything. And you're not necessarily going to get that out. So it's a kind of unusual financial model. Kate Schindel, a really smart Miss America who wrote a really informative book about her story and about some of the contradictions of Miss America, called this practice pay to play. She herself called it out.
Is it time to retire, Miss America?
You know, it's hard to say what it is. You know, I do feel that it's, what is it? Is it a scholarship program? Is it a talent competition? Is it a popularity contest? Is it a beauty contest? Is it a philanthropical, is that the word I'm looking for? Organization. And so, once the swimsuit's out of it, so it's lost its anchor element. And what do we have left? I mean, it seems great that women can get scholarships through Miss America.
Right, like could they just write essays or something?
Could they what?
Just write essays or something? And
right,
also,
yeah.
wait, all right, so what are we? It's hard to keep track of time these days. It's August.
Mm-hmm.
Competitions usually, correct me if I'm wrong, over Labor Day weekend. Is it happening? Okay.
Yeah, it's not happening in this year. They're planning for the 100th anniversary next year. But it has really been, to your question, there's like, should it survive? Can it survive? The can it survive is pretty questionable because it's down, in the 80s, there were something like 80,000 women competing, and now nationally, at all levels, not just at the national level, but there are a whole bunch of tiers of feeder pageants that push people to Miss America. And so the 80,000 of the 70s, 80s is down to 4,000, I think. And the viewership has seen a similar plummet. So the popular interest is not there. But one thing I found, I'm not sure really what kind of, what it offers us as a national ritual anymore. But going to the Miss New York pageant, I sort of understood what the contestants get out of it and the families, because there's a big family component of Miss America and state contestants who've been involved in this for generations and whose extended families have, participated. And so at the Miss New York that I went to, I felt like I could really see on the ground the connection or the connections among the people watching who really got this, kind of taking us back to the early 20th century when beauty pageants were these sort of fertility, cyclical affirmation rituals. And not that the Miss New York was about the women's fertility, but it was about, it had changed significantly in terms of the women designing their own kind of debutante ball where they're presenting themselves. There's not a man, trotting them out there. And there was a woman who delivered a poem that was very progressive about, the fact that she was planned to head for the Senate. And I sort of juxtapose it in the book with guidelines in the 80s where women were taught you have to sit this particular way when you occupy a chair and arrange your arms in a graceful way and lower yourself into a chair very consciously so that you look feminine and, just plunk yourself down. And so this contestant wrote this fabulous poem about how her mother had told her as a little girl to sit like a lady. And the end of the poem said, if you want me to sit like a lady, I'm going to sit in the House and the Senate. That's where you'll see me sitting. So it was just, quite a change from the days of yore. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, Margot is taking questions. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I'm gonna give you a couple here. So we talked about this briefly at the beginning, but I'm gonna come back around to it because I know some people were just tuning in. So it's the centennial of the 19th Amendment. The ratification was 100 years ago tomorrow. We are coming up on the centennial of Miss America. Were these two things related? Was Miss America a response to women getting the right to vote?
Mm-hmm. Oh, so is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it most certainly was, again, either a direct response intended to put women back into the 19th century and evaluate them for their beauty and their marriageability, or at the very least, it was an expression of a kind of unease about the progress women were making and a way to arrest that by reducing them to being pretty bodies, pretty ladies, and compliant good girls who would make a good wife, which was, I'm not just saying that. I mean, the first interview question was always, for the press, was always, who do you want to marry? How many kids do you want to have? What's your child rearing philosophy? And that went on like well into the 60s. And then today, recently, I've seen some, the question of, do you have a boyfriend is always asked of Miss America. Or
it is?
Yeah, people still, and because of this single rule, there have been a few recent Miss Americas who waited till the day after she finished her year to announce her engagement. So it's like a couple have written about how they couldn't even reveal that they had a boyfriend during the time they're Miss America. And that goes back to the fantasy that the women are sexually available, or, maybe not so graphically so, but romantically available.
And what if they had a girlfriend?
They never had girlfriends, but that did change in, well, there is a Miss America, Deirdre Downs Gunn, who was the first to become a doctor and the first to marry a woman. She wasn't out. She wasn't out when she competed. I forget what her year was, but it was in the 21st century, and not that long ago. And she married a woman, and there was some nervousness about. She told me that she was a little worried about how people were going to react to this, and she said people were lovely about it. I heard from some other people who said people weren't that lovely about it behind her back in the pageant world, but it seems that generally it was accepted.
Okay.
And I'll have to add that too, that there is recently, it was announced that Miss America contestants can be trans women, but this has never been a sort of public announcement with any fanfare. It just sort of snuck out on Twitter. And then I noticed in the fan forum, there was some discussion about this. I mean, very supportive discussion of it. And then that tweet disappeared. So I think you can compete as a trans woman, but, and some people said that rule had been in effect for years. It had just never been publicized. And there was
Has there ever been a trans candidate?
There never has. And there has been there have been in other contests, like, I can't remember if it was Miss USA, I think it was Miss Universe.
Wild.
Seemed to be way ahead of Miss America on this. Yeah.
Also, just for the record, and then I'm going to get to this other very good question. Miss. We don't use that word anymore.
Right.
And they all use it.
Yeah, we don't use it
would be
anymore.
MX America now if you were going to modernize it.
Right. And that's a problem because, so yeah, you're right. We don't, if Miss America is preparing women for the professional world, which it's very vocal about doing, the professional world does not use Miss, you're a Ms, but the pageant is sort of trapped because you can't make it Ms. America because there's a pageant for women over, I think, 26 called Ms. America. So what do you do?
Oh man, okay. This is a question about so you talked about rule number 7, which was essentially a white race requirement for contestants. And this person is asking, can you talk about the relationship between that requirement, the eugenics movement of the 1920s, and restrictions on immigration that were passed in that same time period? Can we view Miss America as kind of an embodiment of white America's anxieties about race?
Absolutely. And I do talk about this in the book, that the origins of Miss America, certainly, I guess we talked about how it relates to the vote, but it does clearly seem to be an expression of anxiety about immigration because 20 million people had immigrated to our country around the turn of the century. So there was this question of what are we, what defines our national character and our nationalism. And that segued with the growing eugenics movement, which addressed the same question. And so this project of naming a marriageable, pretty white woman was the solution for that. It was a balm to everything that was happening around us that alleviated that worry, that an ironic worry considering we already were a nation of immigrants, but those forces, along with northern migration, I guess, put people, worried people about national purity and white supremacy.
Mm-hmm. It is fascinating, and this is the point of your book, which everyone should buy. There's a link at the top of where is the link? It's at the top of the chat. But it's like a prism
Right.
through which you can see our fears and anxieties about all these different aspects of society. And that brings me to another good question about how Miss America has informed our beauty standards? Does it reflect them? Does it actually inform them? How much of the anxieties that women face around our bodies, being judged for the way we look, like how is that wrapped into pageant life?
Yeah, I think it does relate. It's a great question because, I mean, we see it now with women running for office and being called nasty women, or Kamala Harris.
Too ambitious.
Yeah, vicious. So this idea that may be more about behavior, about women being expected to conform and be compliant. But in terms of beauty culture, I think this is one of the perils of Miss America now, because it was always a very conventional kind of gender binary beauty. And we've expanded beyond that now. Not only, social media, Instagram influencers can use their own platforms to celebrate their own beauty, and they don't need this kind of top-down sort of pronouncement about who's the prettiest. There's room for lots of different people's senses of beauty or senses of self-presentation. So I think the question was about how it continues to affect.
Well, if it's informed our standards or merely reflected them. It's clearly not reflecting that. I mean, if I can say, it's not reflecting them.
Yeah, so I agree. It certainly is not reflecting the diversity, and I don't just mean racial diversity. I mean diversity of body types and chosen appearance by women in a world where we have gender fluidity and a much greater expanding sense of inclusion that allows for and celebrates a much wider range of appearance.
Yep.
Yeah. And I have to jump in to say, you wrote a great article about smiling in the COVID era, and how like masks allow us not to have to smile all the time because women are always being told to smile.
Right, resting bitch face all day.
Right, exactly. We're all liberated now to have resting bitch face, but smiling was always this huge pressure in Miss America. There's some hilarious stories in there of women talking about how wearying it was to smile all the time. One woman, Jackie Mercer, talked about how she felt like her face was going to break in half because she had to smile from morning till night.
That's so interesting because, okay, so were women expected to smile before that? I mean, clearly we've sort of always been expected to smile, but like that plastered smile, connecting that to, say, how Karen Bass, before Kamala Harris was announced as the VP pick, was being discussed by a male pundit who was saying, oh, when she was actually smiling on TV, she looked quite nice, as if that was such a shock.
Right.
Like these sort of these insidious little expectations you can trace from like the pageant to the women in up for highest office.
Right, yeah. And I don't know how much that existed before, but it does seem to play into that idea of compliancy. And I know that one of the winners, Elizabeth Ward, who now goes by Elizabeth Grayson, talked about how what she called the people pleaser aspect of Miss America was exhausting, and that she felt like it really, it made her have to subordinate herself in so many ways to accommodate all the people around her to be a genial Miss America. And she said she had to just unlearn that at some point. She had won in
So interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, we have to wrap soon, but I think this is a nice question to end on. So you teach writing, and you are a writer. And Mega is saying your book is so deeply researched, and at the same time, it's incredibly lively and fun to read. I agree. It's packed full of history, but has great narrative. and will make you laugh at the same time. What advice might you have for other nonfiction writers seeking to strike the same balance?
Oh,
I would love this advice too.
oh, thank you, Megha. And everybody should read her book too, which it's on my bookshelf right there, The Orange Book of Burning. It's an excellent book. I would say the narrative, the individual stories are the way to get to the bigger historical picture. So the women I interviewed, the Miss Americas I interviewed, and the state winners, who were all really lovely about sharing their stories and really insightful in reflecting on their experiences, funny often about knowing about some of the problems of Miss America, but also down to, I want to say a man, down to a woman devoted to Miss America. Even some of the people who had the most scathing comments to say about some things of Miss America still were really committed to it and love it as an institution. So their stories helped me get into the sort of historical continuum of where this all started and how it interacted with pop culture, feminist culture, American history, political history, all the strains that run through the book that make it make sense as a 100-year-old institution that's worth reflecting on.
So characters,
yeah, get like those narratives just kind of carry you through, and the women I interviewed just had great stories to tell. And they were very different from each other. It wasn't like there was a Miss America type and they all just said, oh yes, I was so excited and I couldn't believe I won. They really had a lot to say about what propelled them there, why they competed, which was all, they all had very different reasons for competing. And then different takes on whether the swimsuit should have been removed and where the pageant's going now. So that was great. And that also makes it fun because you're interacting with interesting people.
That's great. Margot, thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Thank you,
for
Jess.
those, we got great questions too. I mean, I feel like you're still allowed to maybe answer some of these in typing if you want to afterwards.
Yeah.
Or and I know that, yes, or emailing. And I know that the folks at Powerhouse are going to, again, share the link to buy the book. But this is great. It's Looking for Miss America. I have it in front of me. Although my light really disappeared.
My sales as well.
Yeah, it's a really fun read.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing, if people want, because of COVID, if we were at Powerhouse right now, Powerhouse Arena, I could sign books. But if anyone wants me to send them a book plate, I have one here, and I even will make you a promise in writing your book plate not to include bad puns about crowns and gowns in it. So just email me and I'll inscribe the book for you and send you the book plate.
Awesome. That's generous. Thank you. Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Megha, and everyone else who asked questions. And if anybody missed any of the event for any reason, we'll have it on YouTube. Reach out to Margot if you have more questions or if you need a book plate. And please buy the book. We have the link in the chat and on the event page. You can buy it at powerhousebookstores.com. And Margot will give you an original book plate. And it helps Margot and helps us put on more free events. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to both of you. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for coming. Bye.
Bye.